of stuff along the highway. But they'd stop, and I can still remember pulling in the train, big engines, you know, come in, and the fireman or the engineer would yell out of the window, you know, "Hi, Will," to my grandfather, you know. And he'd be waiting on the station with freight and stuff to put on. Well, that was a busy station, but then they had the Depression in 1930 it hit, I think. And they started having layoffs, and they kept getting bumped, you know. And he avoided being laid off, but he got bumped all the way down to this little town. There was a dead end on a railroad spur. And the only thing, the train came in once a week, a combination. It was mostly freight train, several freight cars. And then during the grain season, they had all these cars that collected the grain, you know. But they would deliver farm machinery. Once a week, they got a train, except during the busy harvesting season.
Yeah.
And then when my grandfather was put up to, he'd just make out bills of lading and stuff, you know. And in the afternoons, during the harvest season, it was a different story. But normally, if it wasn't during the busy season, he'd be through by noon, almost with anything to do, and he'd pull up his chair in the front of the depot and prop himself up there. Give me a nickel to go up and get him a cigar. But anyway, I learned all about the silos, because at that little, they had two big silos there, and they actually processed some of the grain into flour or something. Chicken feed, I think. They processed it into livestock feed. But we'd climb up the ladder, another guy and I, and we were about 13, 14, something like that, to the top of the silo and jump down into the grain.
Oh, wow.
How did you do that?
They had a ladder inside, too.
That's funny.
Yeah, that was a good experience for a guy living in the city.
Yeah.
Because I enjoyed those summers. I went to there with visit my grandparents every summer for about 2 months.
Was that in Kansas or Missouri?
They were in Kansas,
Okay.
and I was in Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay. Yeah.
But see, I lived with them. My mother and dad split when I was about 6 months old, I guess, maybe younger than that. They were both young, 19, I think, when they got married. But he was a salesman for one of the insurance companies, Prudential, I think. But he had the route where you go from one town to the next, these small towns. And when he would exhaust one town, he'd move on to another one. And so after several towns, right after they got married, I had me. Well, I guess it was after they got married. And then she went home with her parents and had me, and then went back with him. And they went to a couple of towns, and they hit a town in central Kansas somewhere where there wasn't any place, they couldn't afford to stay there. All they had was a little hotel. And so my father's, my mother went home to her parents in a little town called Fulton, Kansas, where my grandfather was depot agent. And later on, he sent the trunk with all the rest of her stuff and my stuff, and that was the last we ever heard of him.
Wow.
He never got in touch.
Yeah.
He had 3 different wives. He they didn't get along with any of them. Mary went to, where was it? That Democrat paper.
It went down to the Arkansas, Little
Arkansas
Rock.
Democrat
Little
paper.
Rock.
He used to work there.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I'm his granddaughter, and I wanted to see his obituary. And the guy says, his granddaughter? I didn't even know he was married. So he must have been living with a third wife, you know?
No, he was bachelor in an apartment house across from the paper.
Yeah.
So Mary went over and got the obituary and everything for Dad.
Uh-huh.
And where he lived when he was working there had been torn down and made into a parking lot. It was right across from the Capitol,
Right.
Kansas.
Wow.
Arkansas.
Yeah, Arkansas. So Dex, when we were going across country, he had never gotten in touch with Dex.
Mm.
And I said, why don't we look him up and let him see he's got 5 grandchildren.
We had 6.
6. So Dad looked him up in the telephone book and found his address. And he went over there and the lady said he just left the week before. We missed him. I said, I wonder what he'd have thought with 6 grandchildren.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had an aunt who ran into him from time to time in this Yates Center, Kansas, which is just about 15 miles north of Buffalo. And it was a county seat, so it was larger, had about 2,500, 3,000 population. But my aunt would run into him occasionally when he come up there for medical treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And he never said what was wrong, but she would see him and he'd say, well, I've been to the doctors. Because they, she told me that he was in Hutchinson, Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
My mother used to get mad if she knew that anybody told me where he was. She didn't want anything to do with me and have anything to do with it, you know. And he apparently never came around and tried to. So we went in there and we had 6 kids, 8 of us, and we were in a big Packard limousine, you know, that would hold us all. And we pulled in front of the hotel in town, and I went in and looked it up in the phone book, like you said.
Yeah.
Because my aunt had given me a tip he was there.
Yeah.
And at that time, he was a credit union, it was the insurance that credit unions have.
Mm-hmm.
He was a agent for that, and so he moved from town to town.
Yeah.
To that. And I think it was the headquarters was down in Arkansas. But in any event, that would have been funny if he'd come out there.
Did you know his parents? Did you ever know your
No, I
grandparents?
never
and
met
all
the
that?
parents.
Okay.
The story my mother told me was that when he didn't get in touch and send for us, my grandfather knew them because my grandfather was the railroad depot agent in Yates Center, Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my mother went to high school.
Mm-hmm.
They lived there for some time. And so they got to know people pretty well in the area, the farmers and so forth that come in and ship stuff out and receive stuff, you know. So my grandfather knew Grandpa Lacy.
Mm-hmm.
And also my mother's aunt married Ray Stahl, who had a machine shop in the town, and he repaired farm machinery
Mm-hmm.
for all the farmers around. course, he was the one that introduced my father to my mother.
Okay.
That's the way it happened.
Okay.
But my grandfather offered to go to grandfather Lacy
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, you can't get your son on the ball, he's need to do something. And my mother said that she told him, well, if he's not going to his own accord, I don't want anything with it to do with him. That was the end of that.
Yeah.
So back to the original point is I lived with my grandparents, my mother and I did, for about close to 4 years, I guess.
Okay.
So they didn't have a son. They had 3 daughters, and they had a son, but he died shortly after childbirth. And so they kind of cottoned to me, I guess, especially my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And so they always wanted me to come out in the summertime.
Yeah.
Which I did.
Yeah. How long did you go there? How old were you when?
I went there every year until I was 16, and my he died when I was 16 after that summer. He had a stroke the previous year when I was there with him in the summertime. It was in August, and I was going to have to go back to Kansas City. We'll go home. We were sitting on the front porch, and I remember my aunt said, well, asked my grandfather, what are we going to do next summer when Dexter comes? And they got talking about it, and they decided they would visit. My grandfather suggested they visit where he grew up down in Texas during his teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, somewhere in the vicinity of Dallas. But, and while they were talking, he was sitting on the porch with his on the step, and then his legs were on the steps, and all of a sudden he stopped talking and just keeled back.
Yeah.
He had a brain hemorrhage.
Oh, wow.
And, so not long after that he had to retire, and then that was when I was 15, I think, and then at 16, he had retired from work, of course, and went to another little town called, there's a suburb of Kansas City, Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas.
Yeah.
They were in an apartment, and I visited, but he couldn't speak. He couldn't think of any, all he could say was car.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was a car. It was kind of sad, you know.
Yeah.
He'd get so mad because he couldn't express himself
Yeah.
anymore. And so I only stayed there about 3 weeks probably that summer. And after I went home, he died. He died.
And your grandmother?
Well, wait, I should correct myself. He didn't die. I visited, see, in the 16th year, that was when I was 16, they had moved back to where he had been to Yates Center, Kansas, where the family had been for quite a long while, because my mother went to school there. And I visited one summer there, yeah.
Okay.
Most of the summer. And that was the last time.
Yeah.
He died while I was going to school in Kansas City. Nice old gentleman. But they didn't live as long in those days.
Yeah. Did
No,
your
they
grandmother?
didn't. My grandmother died when I was about 58.
Okay.
When she was about 58, I think.
Okay.
And he died when he's 64.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
On the Lacy side, the longevity was there.
Yeah.
Somehow.
So she died not that long after him?
She died before him.
Oh, she died
Yeah.
before him. Okay.
Yeah, my mother had two sisters, and one was 2 years younger than she was, but she was not married. She was working in Kansas City in the for Montgomery Ward Company. I guess you remember that. There was a store similar to Sears.
Yeah.
Big chain.
Yeah.
Well, if you lived out in the country, well, they called it Monkey Wards. They got most of the stuff out of Monkey Wards.
Yeah.
Shipped to them, But she worked there, and when my grandmother died, she quit working and came in to take care, keep house for my grandfather. Things were a lot different in those days.
Yeah.
But that's sort of a little history of my relationship with summertime and thrashing machines and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Erna, that's the one in Kansas, she's a Protestant, and they go to church more than we do.
Really?
3 times a week they're going to church. They practically live in church.
Wow.
Well, it's a social thing.
Yeah.
It's a social
And
thing.
then
It is
she
for a lot
met
of
some
people,
guy that his wife died, and he'd come around and visit her, and he was Catholic. And he wanted to marry her, and she wouldn't marry him because he was Catholic. But when he died, he left all his money to her.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, they were just buddies. They didn't live together.
Yeah.
She's a very friendly, outgoing person, Erna is. She calls almost every holiday. Says,
She
I
don't
never
write.
write, I'll just call you.
She phones instead. She
Yeah.
don't write.
Yeah.
We send her Christmas cards and Easter cards, and she just phones.
Yeah.
And all her family live right in the same block, real close.
Yeah.
Just a little town.
Wow. When's the
But
last?
they had, her son was, the whole family was very friendly when we went back there. And they all they called everybody, and we had lunch in a little local restaurant there. It was kind of...
And her one son looked exactly like President Clinton. You'd
Sounded
think it
like
was
him,
him.
too.
That's funny.
But such a sad thing, he was so nice and outgoing, and he drove us around the area and got us familiar with it. And he retired, I guess, when he hit 65, and his wife was maybe 3 or 4 years younger. She was still working. But, and their family, their 2 children were adults, young adults. And when he retired, he bought a motorcycle.
Oh.
And a motorhome.
Yeah.
And they were planning to travel in that motorhome.
Yeah.
They never traveled much because he went out for a joyride on his motorcycle and got killed
Yeah.
out on an open highway.
Wow. Yeah.
Sad.
His wife and he were childhood sweethearts. She was so broken up.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
had a lovely place to live in there.
Yeah.
They sued the trucker that killed him.
Yeah.
He sideswiped the motorcycle.
Yeah.
All right.
And when they examined it all and went to court, she got a big settlement, so she moved to, what was her place?
Well, it's near Branson, Missouri, well, which is kind of a place where they have a lot
Ozarks, in the
It's
Ozarks.
an entertainment center
Yeah.
now.
Her daughter
They have,
lives
they
there.
have the
so
Lawrence
she knew her
Welk
daughter.
annual shows come out there.
Yeah.
Some old country singers and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a big
Yeah,
music center.
I've heard of that in the
Okay.
context of country music stars.
It's
Okay,
adjacent
yeah.
to a place. Branson didn't exist as such as it is now when I
Yeah.
was young. But when I got down there when I was fairly young, there was a adjacent little town that had all of these little businesses, kind of an artist colony.
Yeah.
They call it Silver Dollar City. I don't know how they got that name.
Yeah.
But Branson grew up right next to it, I guess.
So when's the last time that you went back to Kansas City?
Oh, it must have been about a long time ago.
When we visited, what's her name, that lives in the house, the back part of the house is mud, what do they call it?
Pam.
Yeah, Pam.
She's my sister's daughter.
Oh, okay.
But that part of the house is like underground.
Oh, okay.
Right with a
Yeah.
mud house.
Yeah.
I think it was about 12 years ago, 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
My sister Virginia is 80. She's 87, and then our next sister's 85, and the next one's 83.
Oh, okay.
And then I have a brother
And they all live out there?
who's 75. They all live in separate places.
Okay.
I have a sister that lives in Oklahoma City, or the suburbs of it,
Okay.
and her husband died about a year ago. But they lived in an area of northeast Oklahoma. They have a lake that's about 80 miles long,
Mhm.
but it's only a couple 100 yards wide.
Mm-hmm.
The Tennessee Valley Authority created it during the Great Depression as more or less a work project, but it also provided power to the area because it was made for the express purpose of creating power. The water would
Mhm.
flow over a dam,
Yeah.
create electricity.
Called the Lake of the Cherokees.
So Virginia and her husband lived there, and he had a small business near an army fort down there where he sold, it was sort of a haberdashery shop, and he sold suits and shirts and ties and stuff. And they had a lot of black soldiers there. And one of his biggest business, he told me, was they liked to really dress up,
Yeah.
when they leave the fort, they wanted
Yeah.
to get dressed up, and they had, I guess they could keep their civilian clothes
Yeah.
somewhere. But they were always buying ties and shirts and suits and stuff. He said they were his best customers.
Yeah.
But the poor fella got hit by a broadside by a fella in a pickup truck. And then I guess he was in a pickup truck too. There was an intersection,
Mm-hmm.
and the other fella had a stop sign, I guess. But he ignored it, and they had high banks and a lot of foliage and brush. And he was crossing and got hit right on the side.
Oh, wow.
So she lost him. But back to my sister, Virginia, and her husband, and then my other sister, Juanita, who's 2 years younger. She lived there with her husband, a retired master sergeant in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And then her other sister, my sister, was Valma, too. She's the one that's 83 or 84 now. She lived there with her husband, who was retired. And they all lived in their own little mobile homes along the lake. Big retirements.
And where's your brother?
Well, he lived there for a while too. They had a regular little
Ralph, right?
family center.
Yeah,
he's
I
the
remember
youngest.
Ralph.
But then we lost three siblings.
Yeah.
We lost my youngest. It's kind of ironic that the four oldest are still living.
Yeah.
And my sister Wanda was our youngest sister. She died of leukemia.
Okay.
And then the other two died from smoking too damn much in their life. But one was complicated by mesothelioma, asbestos exposure. They all followed me to some time in the Navy. And one just joined the reserves and served during the Korean War, but he didn't go to Korea. He was in aviation. Served. He was an aviation machinist mate, I guess. But then the next one, Bill, he joined and became an aviation machinist mate and stayed for 22 years, I guess. But he got away from being a machinist mate. He became a navigator on flight engineer, they call him, on these big planes that serve the Orient, all the stations across the Pacific. And then he was stationed down in the Dallas area for a while. And he was in up near San Jose, at an air station up there when he retired. But he was stationed in Hawaii, but he spent a lot of time in the air.
Yeah. What year were you in Hawaii? It was after Pearl Harbor, right?
No, it was, yes, it was, I arrived there a month after Pearl Harbor.
Okay.
And
I was kidding him. I told him he lived a sheltered life. Went to the farm every summer and everything. My grandfather was Irish. They came over from Ireland. And they had a saloon during Prohibition.
Yeah.
And the cops used to come around try to catch them, when they had liquor in the place. My father lived down the street from the saloon. And when he had a friend by the name of Link Shaw that would phone him and tell him when they were going to raid. So Dad would take the liquor down to our house and put it out in the alley. And the cops had come down because they knew my mother and father lived down the street. And my mother was having the Catholic Daughters of America meeting at her house. She had the priest there and all these women. When the cops came in to raid, she was so embarrassed. They didn't find the liquor. It was out in the alley. They didn't look in the alley. But I was always kidding Dad that my father quit his job. He had a good job at the Water Bureau. He was chief clerk because his father was too old to go to jail. And either my father or my Uncle Gene would go in his place. And the guy that was always trying to catch him, his name, we nicknamed him Clubby, because he used to hit everybody over the head with his stick. I can remember when I was 3 years old. He went by and I said, "Hello, Clubby." He looked at me.
Yeah.
They had this, they called them tap rooms in Philadelphia, but essentially they were saloons.
Yeah.
They had it before Prohibition.
Yeah.
And when Prohibition came along, they just continued to stay in business as long as they could.
Yeah.
I eventually, if I remember correctly, your dad said they went out, they closed the saloon and converted it to a grocery store, didn't they?
After my grandfather died.
Yeah. The things got a little hot. Then after the prohibition was off, they rented it out as a tap room again to somebody else.
Yeah.
That was Mickey McGuire's Tavern. That was what it was called. That was there when I first went to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Mickey McGuire's Tavern.
That was my grandmother's maiden name, McGuire. She came over from Ireland with 5 sisters on a boat. And how I found that out, my girlfriend, Mary Fensel, who lived a couple blocks away, her grandmother was Mary Eisenhart, and she came over on the same boat with her. And she told me, I knew your grandmother and her 4 sisters. That's how I found out that. But I kidded because I grew up.
Well, a different kind of a life, that's for sure.
My grandfather would say, come up to the saloon in the morning and I'll give you a little glass of beer, and he'd give me a shot glass full of beer. I liked it. My mother would go to kiss me and smell the beer and she'd be mad. But my brother, he'd go up there and my grandfather would give him Limburger cheese to eat, and he loved it. He'd come home and smell the Limburger. He tried to give me some on a cracker and I spit it on the floor, and he says, go on home and don't come back. I didn't like the smell of it.
Yeah.
Well, it was a different kind of a life in Philadelphia, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Because that was typical. I had never seen much about Philadelphia, but it was kind of like I'd seen movies of New York.
Yeah.
Because you had a trolley car line right on the front of the house. Trolley car went right by the row houses.
Mm-hmm.
And across the street you had
Pullman's
produce store. So you just walk across the street and buy your carrots and whatever, potatoes and all of that. Then next door to it was a grocery store where you bought your groceries. But then up the street on the same side was about a half a block was the butcher shop. But it was the butcher period. It didn't sell.
Yeah, and my mother used to go in there and say she wanted an old hen to cook. And Louis Edelstein was Jewish, and he says, what do you do with that hen? What do you make? She says, I'll bring you over a dish and let you taste it. And she would boil that hen, cut up, and for about 3 hours. But the last half hour she would roll out dough, kind of tough, not like for pie.
Yeah.
And she cut it in squares and lay the squares of dough on top of the chicken as it was boiling with the lid on. It was delicious. That was the pot pie.
Yeah.
It was called chicken pot pie.
Yeah.
And we all loved it. So Mother took a dish of chicken pot pie over to Louis Edelstein.
Mm-hmm.
And he loved it. He had my mother write down how she made it.
Mm-hmm.
And they had it once a week.
Then up the corner you had Mickey McGuire.
You can use the restroom. I'll be right back.
Then across the street from there was June Drug Store. Different kind of a life completely from where I lived. I lived in it was just a neighborhood, all residential. And little small grocery stores here and there, and that was it. And we never had a drop of liquor in the house or beer.
No, we had lots of it around. That's why I kidded him. And when we had a picture taken in the Claridge Hotel in Memphis, and all these bottles of liquor were on the table, and Nanny Horner noticed it as soon as she saw the picture.
So what was the name of the town in Hawaii that you lived in again?
Kaneohe.
Okay.
It was Kaneohe is the name of the air station, but they had a little town named Kaneohe nearby.
Okay. And was that on the west coast?
It's on the west. It's on the windward side.
Yeah.
On the other side of the Paleo, the mountains.
Yeah. Okay. That's the one side that we didn't really go around much.
Yeah, they call it the windward side because it had a constant breeze.
Yeah.
In the north. And,
So are you going over there again?
Yeah, we're going back in October. But we mostly stayed on the North Shore and then the leeward side.
well, it's, you know, if you're in Honolulu, you drive down past Diamond Head and go on around.
Oh, wait, you were on that side.
No, you keep going until you can get there by doing that, or you could go over the mountain. There was two ways to get to Kaneohe from Honolulu.
Oh, maybe. Wait, now I'm confused. Which is the windward and which is the leeward?
Well, you confused me with the leeward. I'm not sure.
Because.
What do you mean by the leeward?
Okay. So it's on the side of the island where from Honolulu, if you go around Diamond Head, you were on that side.
You just keep going all the way around the island.
Okay. We were over there.
Yeah.
Was Kailua near there?
Kailua is very close.
Okay. Yeah, no, we spent a lot of time right there.
Yeah, I've been to, we got there, I think it was just a few days short of being a month since Pearl Harbor. We got there in the first week in January, as I recall. I was with a patrol squadron, these big seaplanes, and they were due to go to Iceland, and I went to Quonset Point, Rhode Island to join them, and was with them maybe 2 months before they were to leave. And we had our bags packed to go to Iceland. It was actually that all our stuff was aboard ship, sitting at the dock at the air station, Quonset Point Naval Air Station. And we were given liberty on that Sunday, told to just be back that evening. And they were going to leave in the morning for Iceland. So we were in Providence, Rhode Island, in a Chinese restaurant when we heard Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
There were about 4 of us. And so to make a long story short, the flight crews and the planes left right away.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of going to Iceland, they went to Kaneohe.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of the ground crews, including myself, the ship left and took us down to Norfolk and put us on a train.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, they must have been a little confused in what they were going to do. I still don't understand why they took us to Norfolk by sea.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of putting us on a train in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, they dumped us in Norfolk, put us on a train, and we stayed on that train all the way to San Francisco.
Okay.
And then it put us on an old chartered freighter and took us to Hawaii.
Oh, so you went on a plane from San
No,
Francisco?
the ground crew, we went by
boat.
freight train.
No.
We went by train and by boat all the way.
Okay. By boat.
But the plane crews, of course, there were squadrons stationed at Kaneohe prior to Pearl Harbor, and actually they were hit. The planes, when they went to bomb Pearl Harbor, as I understand it, their primary target was Pearl Harbor. But on their return, if they had any ammunition left, they'd shoot up Kaneohe Naval Air Station. And it's been in the paper. It was special yesterday about it on TV, about this fellow that won the Medal of Honor. He was a chief aviation machinist mate. When they were shooting up the hangars and stuff, he was out on the concrete area with a machine gun shooting back at the planes.
Standing there, if I didn't pull Phew.
Yeah.
He never got hit by a bullet, I guess, but he got hit by shrapnel
Yeah.
fragments that were
Yeah.
flying up. And all during the attack, I guess he was exchanging these shots with these Japanese planes.
Wow.
He wasn't there when I got there, I don't think. He might have been for a short time, but they, of course, got him back to the States.
Yeah.
And he probably went on tour, you know, like they did with some of these fellows that won the Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
But anyway, we got there in early January, and the squadron stayed there till after the Battle of Midway.
Mm-hmm.
They patrolled for the Battle of Midway, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But we just got sort of secondhand news of what was going on. And then the planes left and went down to New Caledonia, and we followed by ship,
Mm-hmm.
the ground crews did.
So how long were you in Hawaii?
About 6 months.
Okay.
Until after the Battle of Midway, and I think that was I lose dates. We left in August, as I recall, early August. So we were there at least 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 7 months. They had a nice little hospital there.
Mm-hmm.
They had a women's medical ward, and then they had children's ward, and then they had the men's ward. And it was a busy little place, because they had quite a people stay, a lot of stations there.
Mm-hmm.
And did a lot of outpatient work, you know. So I worked, at that time, worked on the ward for a while. I worked in the pharmacy for a while. Then they put me down the hangar to, when fellas that get minor injuries or not feel well one thing or another, they were coming up to the dispensary, they called it. Now they call them station hospitals. And they'd be gone for an hour or more, you know, maybe a couple hours. They decided to solve that problem by establishing a little medical station in the hangar. And so they get them back to the job faster, you know.
Yeah.
They had 24 hours going on.
Yeah.
Maintaining the planes, and I ended up down in the hangar manning it. Doctor'd go down there in the morning, and then he'd leave after the morning sick call. Guys would come in, and you took care of everything that didn't need the attention. Minor scrapes and cuts and bruises and headaches and colds you can take care of down there. Then I'd get to be the rest of the day by myself. It was nice. Just busy enough that you... And I enjoyed it because I got to know the crews. Mm-hmm. Your real job with the corpsman was you supplemented the medical station wherever you went because of the extra patient load. So you didn't, if you went up there and worked and lived with the dispensary crews, you didn't see much of your squadron. So it was nice working in the hangar.
Yeah.
You got to know them all, you know.
Yeah.
And then when you went down to South Pacific, your headquarters was a ship. It was a mothership. And when the planes would land on the water,
Mm-hmm.
they'd come aboard for the night, you know. And in the morning they'd take off again.
Right.
So there, when we got down there, first we were in New Caledonia, which is it's kind of directly east of Australia.
Okay.
Then we moved for a little further north, about 300 miles, to the New Hebrides, which it was a a main staging area for Guadalcanal.
Mm.
And they operated out of there, keeping track with the Japanese fleet, I guess.
Mm.
Because they weren't combat planes, they were...
was back in Hawaii
What?
station, weren't you?
What?
When the war was over.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's true, yeah.
You went back again?
I was on, I had been back to Memphis where I met her after a year in the South
Mhm.
Pacific. And then we were married, and then they sent me to a ship that was a combat transport that carries Marines. And I guess we were in Memphis about 8 months. Then I would go to San Pedro, and the ship was being commissioned. Was being built, actually.
Mm.
And I think it was in December they were ready to go out to sea trials, and she went home to Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on it for a year, and then the war was over. We took Marines to Iwo Jima. We took a complete Army hospital unit to Okinawa.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got promoted to a war officer, so they detached me from the ship. The ship came back to Pearl Harbor,
Mm-hmm.
and they detached me, and I was to await transportation back to the States
Mm-hmm.
for reassignment.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there, the war ended.
Yeah. Okay. Is that them?
Sounds like a door.
Yep, that's them.
Big green pickup truck.
Yep.
Somebody I know.
Hi.
Hi, Greg. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Hi, Greg,
Hi.
how you doing?
You guys got all the Schneider's today.
Nice.
That's great. Katie, haven't seen you in a long time.
Hi! Oh, I can
Good to see you.
Oh, it's been so long.
Yes!
I have to use the bathroom.
I'm right behind you too. They had some road construction, so we were stuck in traffic.
We got 2 bathrooms if you want to go all the way
Oh
back.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Be careful.
It'll sit down.
Yeah.
Yeah, make yourself at home now. Sit down. Find a seat. Need a cold drink or anything?
Oh, sure.
You okay?
Anyone else want anything?
When I